Okay, we are live for episode 180 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing good. A little bit of technical difficulties. That's why we're running a little bit late, but never fear. We're back up and running. So excited.
Yeah, we troubleshooted in true Starfleet engineering fashion and got it together. Uh, we're excited to talk about Jadzia Dax this week. I think this is a really natural point to do that. You just finished your season 6 rewatch, and
Yeah.
I think what better time to kind of reflect on the Jadzia character. Dax isn't wrapped up yet. We have another season of all new Dax stuff. But we have a kind of completed story for Jadzia. Um, and if anybody's out, can you see the video on your end? I have a little message
I
that's
could.
kind of
I can see the video on
is it
stream.
coming through clean. Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
cool. Should be okay. Um, so yeah, we have a kind of completed story for Jadzia to think about and reflect on, and uh, see what we think about the character as a whole, and beginning, middle, and end. So I guess the place to start it could be really anywhere. Um, we alluded to it. I guess maybe we should just jump right into the way the character wrapped up. Well, we haven't done a rewatch recap. I'm all out of sorts. So um,
Yeah.
let's before we get into Dax, bear with us, and we're going to talk real quick about what we rewatched this week. I don't have a ton. I've got a couple episodes. What about you? Are you
Neither do
into
I.
season 7? Um,
I watched the first episode of season 7. I went pretty hard to wrap up the season, so I generally like to take a break. But it was kind of tough too. That transition between 6 and 7 is tough to just leave, uh, just like that, like it did.
sure.
Um, uh, yeah. Maybe we'll do a follow up on the Ezri Dax character, but
Yeah.
I always find it a little too soon introducing her in the first episode back. I know it's kind of in the tail end, maybe like literally at the end of the episode, but I don't know. Yeah, that's all I have. But I do like the deliberation that Cisco goes on of trying to find himself, and we don't usually get that in Star Trek. It's usually like just the flip of a switch, and we don't get to see that struggle, I think, and I like that about this episode. But yeah, at least for me, it's
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Family, the first episode of season 7, in that the captain is dealing with like a personal crisis and trying to
yeah,
come to terms with trauma and loss and you know grief. All those things are, and what does the character do? They go home to like the ultimate comfort um,
mm-hmm.
zone.
Yeah,
I don't think it's as successful as Family. I think it's pretty mellow stuff. That first episode, Image in the Sand,
yeah,
but like you said, I do appreciate that it gives the character of Cisco some room to breathe and to
mm-hmm.
try to cope with the events of the end of season 6. Um, so yeah, and for me, it's been kind of an all Deep Space Nine, just 3 episodes this past weekend, at least so far. Yesterday, I watched kind of right in the middle of that season 6 opening run. I watched Sons and Daughters,
Mm-hmm.
Behind the Lines, and Favor the Bold. So I have one more to
Nice,
go in that run with
solid
Sacrifice of
run.
Angels. Yeah, it's really into the thick and thin of that serialized point in Deep Space Nine that we've been talking about because you just wrapped up season 6. I'm just starting it. Sons and Daughters, I could kind of take and leave. I know you were higher on it than I have tended to be. I do like the more, I like the approach to take an episode in that run that is so populated by, big story arcs and broad strokes with the universe and the war and big things happening. And Sons and Daughters deals with very like small personal things, with Worf and Alexander, and Gul Dukat and Zial, and Kira's relationship with Zial. I like the fact that there's a little moment to breathe where it deals with more personal issues. But I do struggle a little bit with Alexander. I think the shoehorning Alexander back into the story doesn't totally feel necessary to me, and it's not something that I have ever really responded to. I kind of find it a little flat. And I always, especially this last go around, I've kind of had some struggles with whenever Kira has moments of like. She's pushing back against Dukat pretty consistently here, but she's got that moment where she gets the dress from Damar, dropping it off, and she opens it, and for a second she's kind of into it, and she forgets who it's from. Like there are moments like that not just in this episode where Kira kind of falls into maybe
you have a hard time
more accepting like I find it hard to believe that Kira would allow herself to go there. So that's not my favorite episode in this run by any means, but it does bring some nice change of pace to the table. Behind the Lines does some really bold stuff with Odo and puts him in some really compromising and challenging positions and forces us to look at him kind of cross-eyed. And I find that thematically in keeping with the way they built the Odo character, where he's really torn by his kind of instinctual urge to go back home and be with his people, and that's kind of been his driving force his whole life. There's a lot of complication there, kind of clashing with his relationship with Kira, and his feelings for her. I think a lot of that stuff on display in Behind the Lines is really good. And Favor the Bold tees up Sacrifice of Angels and the culmination of this whole thing pretty darn well. So, yeah. Good Deep Space Nine, for sure. But I have, in this next run, I've Scientific Method, and then after that, it's a really weird point with the overlap where it's Year of Hell 1, Sacrifice of Angels, and Year of Hell Part 2. Like, so that's like a 3, like, bang, bang, bang of pretty big
heavy hitter
episodes. So I'm looking forward to that. I may hit that today or early next weekend. So that's where we are with the rewatch. I think we should get right into Dax. And I was going to start with the death, since that's kind of where we talked about it last week and what kind of prompted this conversation. But I think maybe what I'll do, what I'm curious to ask you about is, like, what are your kind of just broad stroke general feelings on Dax? Like, if you had to describe her as a character with the whole beginning, middle, and end in mind, like, what are your kind of most broad general takeaways coming off of it now?
That she's such a dynamic character. Like, she has these like quietly powerful moments with Sisko as a very counselor, not counselor type role, but she's a counsel to Sisko, and I really like that. But also, she's got this really fun side with Quark and with Kira and stuff. So she's really dynamic and really balanced, I think. And it's funny because I think at the beginning of the show, she kind of feels a little bit one-dimensional. They're trying to figure out kind of where to go with the character. And I think that, to me, that kind of is the period of when the Trill is symbiont is trying to she's trying to differentiate between all the past hosts and herself, and how that's gonna kind of manifest itself. So I think there's some cool progression there. Like I said, I think my favorite parts of her is the counselor role, kind of
relationship with Sisko.
I think is kind of cool to explore. And then a little bit later on, I think it's a really fun yin and yang relationship that she has with Worf. I think she's kind of a firecracker, and Worf is kind of more just kind of straight and narrow. So I really do like that as well. But very dynamic character.
Yeah, I think dynamic's a good word because of how shifty she is. Real quick, before we get into that, we do have a few people in the chat that I want to acknowledge. Cyber Honey, our old faithful who's always here. Love to see you. Thank you for stopping by. Jimmy77, same thing. And we have a newcomer, Dr. BNNC from Twitter. Welcome. I think this is a first-time visit, so
good to see you.
Thrilled to see you here. Please feel free to share your thoughts on Jadzia Dax. We'll try our best to incorporate your comments and You guys might
Yes.
spawn a conversation we're not expecting, and we're happy to do that. That's why we do it live and embrace the
Yeah.
chat. So thank you for stopping by. But yeah, I think the ever shifting kind of tones of her character are a real foundation and a kind of her calling card. I think you kind of put it well, where depending on the situation and who she's with and which memories and personality from the host that she's tapping
Yeah.
into, she can be like an old man, old friend, counselor from the Jadzia Dax days with Cisco, and she can call
Yeah.
back to those qualities and be that sort of mentor and guiding voice through tough times. But at the same time, she's still just Jadzia is a young woman who's got a lot of pizzazz and energy and is kind of a
Yeah.
firecracker. And you put her in a situation with Quark or with Worf, and a lot of those qualities come out, and very different than Curzon. And I think the challenge that they had early on, and they struggled with, I think, at the very very early part of the show, is kind of finding that voice and that ability to be so flexible with allowing different qualities to come out depending on the situation and depending on who she's interacting with. Um, Early on, I've kind of mentioned before. I think if you watched us going back to when either you or I were watching early Deep Space Nine. I think they took almost like a sort of Vulcan-y approach in that early run of episodes where she's very wise. I
Yeah.
think they tap a lot into the Curzon idea, this older person, old soul, full of wisdom and
Yeah.
knowledge and being the scientist. All these factors kind of culminated in a very Vulcan portrayal in the early days. And I do think, thankfully, they were able to break out of that maybe within a season and a half, maybe a little less than that,
Yeah.
and we're able to find some more dynamic and varied tones for the Jadzia character. Thankfully, I think that really became, like I said, her foundation and her best quality. In fact, she has many qualities. Yeah. Was there an episode, or if you think back to those early days, early on, like do you have a point in mind where you thought, okay, this is where she really starts to feel kind of lived in, and this is the Dax I remember? Do you feel like there's a
Uh,
point where it hits?
it's tough because she's got a lot of great moments. Like I said, like the stuff with her relationship with Cisco. I think anytime there's a struggle or something's going on,
Yeah.
she's there giving. Um, but I guess like part of her character development. This is just one of those episodes that kind of jumped and popped into my mind. But I think of Blood Oath.
Yeah.
I think of her trying to um, work through like the symbiont's past and things like that. I really do think that that's kind of a fun thing to explore with the kind of Trill species, is like how we deal with the past, and I think it's a very dramatic ending
Yeah.
that I find really strong, and I think from then on, um, the character is a little bit different, and I guess Deep Space Nine is a little bit different, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's one of those episodes that kind of pops into my mind where, and they do it a few different times of exploring Dax's past, but this one really, I think, hit home, and Terry Farrell does a great job playing it. So yeah, I think of Blood Oath. I
Blood Oath.
think is the first one that comes to mind.
I think Blood Oath is probably the one. I think it's the first kind of undeniably great episode for me that really puts her in the spotlight and allows some of those flexible qualities to emerge.
Mhm.
But I do think I think we talked about either in it might have been in your season 2 recap. Playing God is an episode that is not the most memorable. It's not the most successful. It's not the most dynamic. It's the episode with the young Trill initiate coming to the station to be
Yeah.
mentored by Jadzia, and Jadzia is going to either
Mhm.
sign off on him being joined or not. And the one sort of saving grace of that episode for me is that it does explore that element to Dax's character. Like, yeah, that her nature is fluid, and part of the challenge to becoming joined and living as a joined Trill is to find that balance and be able to use all these personality traits and be your own person, and like these things are being explored there in a way that when I think of her and I think of the journey early on, that might be the first point where that really pops to me. And I think of the scene where he shows up to her quarters and she's having a party, or she's hanging out with that wrestler guy, and he's like, "Wow," like it really like this is not the expected behavior, and yeah, I just feel like that might be the first point that really embraces she can be amiable and isn't just kind of a cool, quiet, cool as a cucumber scientist with all this knowledge and wisdom and stuff rattling around in her head. Yeah, but Blood Oath is the superior episode that I think is more memorable and makes more of an impact, especially given how large the Klingon stuff ends up looming in Jadzia's character too. Not even just with Worf, but that it becomes such an interest for her, and another kind of foundational element of her character is tapping into Curzon's history with the Klingons and having these friendships and the exposure to Klingon culture and then a deep appreciation for it and connection to their history and tradition.
And for me, just a thought came through. I just wonder, is it because she's so... Is it because Curzon was so involved with the Klingons? Is that why? Because he was the past host? Is that kind of the leftovers, or is Curzon more of an impact, like more of a stronger influence on her? Like it's kind of tough to think about. I don't know, or maybe that's just because that's where the way the show went. I don't know.
I mean, I
all
think
three, maybe.
all the above. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I definitely think that there are points along the way that maybe imply that the Curzon impact on Jadzia is maybe greatest because of the fact that it's the most recent host. I think the fact that Jadzia Dax is serving with somebody who has such a personal connection with Curzon and keeps those memories alive and dynamic and moving. That's all credible to me that Curzon looms so large in Jadzia. Not just the fact that it's most recent, but that that there are remnants of Curzon's experience still in the picture for Jadzia.
And I just wonder, is that how all Joint Trail are? Is because that's who they did their like they were initiated with that person.
Yeah.
And like, is that why? I've always wondered that. So because in the show they don't really lean too heavily on the other hosts. I mean, they do explore all the hosts in an episode, but I just feel like Curzon is such an influence on Jadzia that it really, really comes through.
It does, and that's a good question. How much does the most recent host, like, does recency play a part in how much of an impact that it'll have on the new personality, on the new host? And that's certainly an open question. Like you said, the show chooses to emphasize Curzon by far the most compared to the other hosts that we kind of briefly talk about here and there. But I kind of chalk that up to a combination of that and, like I said, the having Curzon's stuff in the picture as well. That has to bring a lot of things out to the surface. And Jeff Stone, who's a member of our Discord server and friend of ours,
see you, Jeff,
is mentioning Discovery Season 4. Hopefully might delve a little bit more into this with having another joined sort of Trill character. Right? Yeah, exactly. That's a whole nother wrinkle. But
I mean, because never mind.
Yeah, that's a whole different discussion. Yeah, but there are opportunities to continue to explore this relationship with the symbiont, which is cool with the new stuff. But yeah, I definitely think the Curzon dynamic really looms large and probably does play a part in the Klingon stuff, at least in the story. They make a lot of points to talk about Curzon's experience as a diplomat and dealing with the Klingons and having years of exposure to their culture and making friends in their society and having influential Klingon friends. And I certainly think that plays a part in why Jadzia is so drawn to Klingon culture as well, which obviously makes a big impact later on in her character arc. Yeah. Jimmy77 mentions Equilibrium, Facets, Dax as other good Jadzia-centric episodes. All true. Yeah, we have. There are a lot. I mean, I think Equilibrium is a big one. Facets, certainly. Facets is kind of, kind of an underrated critical piece of understanding Dax. The physically getting to meet the prior hosts, even briefly, to kind of illustrate the
all joined trill. Isn't it all joined trill get to do that though?
Yeah, they seem to indicate that that's like a tradition that is kept alive, and that's an opportunity that everybody gets eventually. But
that's another thing that I'm pretty fascinated with, like the whole culture aspect of it is so cool, and just it's a very high sci-fi concept too. That there's same species but different types of sub kind of categories. Really cool.
Yeah, agreed. Jimmy77 mentions Rejoined. I think that's up there for me with Blood Oath. Yeah. I think getting to the heart of the minutia of living as a joined trill, like the day-to-day details, that there are people that are probably best avoided because of the emotional entanglements that will come, from meeting, people who you've had intimate, deep connections with, are gonna bring problems to the surface for a new host.
I think since the very beginning we all have that question. All had that question at the beginning of the show. Like, what if they meet someone that they, and so I love that they kind of explore that here.
Yeah, I think it puts the Dax character into a really obviously emotionally vulnerable place, and is territory rich for the mining dramatically to put her in that position, and the obvious queer ramifications for exploring that storyline. The LGBTQ representation aspect of it is well documented, and really an impactful part of Deep Space Nine and Dax's character. All that stuff is really relevant as well, kind of groundbreaking. So that looms large for me too when I think about Dax's character. I think that's a big episode. Because of it's not just exploring Dax as a character, it's shedding more light on the Trill experience and their culture and all that stuff. It's got broad relevance
today.
Yeah,
big time.
And it reflects us as well. It's not just a untouchable, far out there science fiction concept. There's stuff to be mined in our own society as well. How do you feel about the way Worf coming into the show impacts Dax's character? Do you think Cyber Honey mentioned something about eventually feeling in her mind that Worf maybe overshadows her or becomes a very defining part of that character? Do you find that at all? Do you find Worf's presence is unlocking something in Dax that makes her even more appealing? Do you think it's a net positive and net negative? How do you feel about that introduction?
No, I kind of said it at the top of the show. I think the character does change a little bit. It's a little bit different dynamic, but I think that yin and yang type of very they've got some things that they have in common. The duty aspect, they're very good at what they do, but I think Jadzia Dax is such a can be so fun and so just an extrovert type of personality where she can have fun. She can, she's got great dynamics with Quark as well. So the parties and things like that. And I think Worf is kind of the opposite. He does have some similar qualities that I think they would definitely bond with the they care about their careers and very knowledgeable and what they do. But I feel like he's more the lone wolf type. And so I definitely like that. So I think it's a fun dynamic. I have no problem with it. I don't think they get overshadowed with it. I think there's plenty of examples of where she wants to still remain independent and she makes her own decisions and stuff. And so I don't have a problem with it. I know the dynamic and her character changed a little bit, but I think it's not better or worse. It's just just as good. So yeah. So
yeah, I would echo that. I think the Worf introduction brings out some new colors and qualities in Dax. Allows her to play. Anytime you can unlock that more intimate side of a character and you get into a more, especially in Star Trek, I think it's obviously so about duty and doing your job and living your professional life because of just the nature of what the show is. So much of the time is spent on the bridge or at your station and doing your thing. Kind of like with what we talked about before with like Tom and B'Elanna, when you start that, you get an opportunity to explore a different side of the character and their more personal life. You get a little bit of that with Sisko with his family life as well, but a lot of these characters don't have that consistent domesticated stuff outside going on. Yeah. And getting that with Dax and Worf unlocks some new textures, and I think one of the strengths of Deep Space Nine is that it finds ways to do that with a number of its characters, with O'Brien and, like I said, Sisko with being a father, and Jake and the Frankie family. Like, they do a lot of stuff with the family dynamics and getting into more domestic territories. So I enjoy that. Like you said, I like the fact that it's not clean, that they butt heads, that they have a lot in common, appreciation for Klingons' culture and tradition and connecting on that level. And obviously their common career paths, and they have a lot there that would obviously be building blocks for a relationship, but they have differences as well. Worf is so married to tradition and doing things a certain way, and that's been consistently portrayed going back to early TNG with his relationship with Kalar in an episode like the Emissary, when they have their thing, and Worf thinks that means we have to do this, and Worf mimics a lot of that behavior with Dax later on in Deep Space Nine, where Dax is so individual, and I think that feels right because of her experiences living as so many individuals, and I think she understands the value of kind of embracing your own instincts and your own personal qualities and just living your own life, because she's been there and she's done it and she's experienced all these different ways of doing it by now and has made mistakes, and I think all those things are well executed in their relationship and allow for those qualities and themes to be explored in ways that are different than what had been done up to that point.
And I think she pushes Worf to be a better person, to be more outgoing. She has a great kind of influence on Worf, and definitely pushes him kind of outside his comfort zone.
Agreed.
But I like that it's not just all hunky dory. It's just a really easy relationship. It's like there's some struggles, and I like the humor of back and forth, and it's really good.
Jeff says that she seems to embrace differences in others, even Quark, and I think that's true too. I think that kind of goes along with what we were just saying with. I think she understands the gray in people. I think living all those lifetimes and having all these experiences would translate that to somebody, I would imagine. And I think that's well executed too. Dr. BNNC talks about the transition of meeting your former hosts, interested to see how that is depicted in Discovery Season 4 with Tal, and why they decided to refer to it as the Circle, and Forget Me Not. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff to mine with the Adira Tall character, and Grey Tall as well. Jimmy77 mentions you were cordially invited as a good insight into Jadzia's personality. We talked about that last week with the season 6 recap, and a couple weeks prior when you had just watched that. I'm coming up on that myself, and I think you even talked about like the way that episode puts the spotlight on Jadzia's character and puts her into some tough situations with, having to. It's kind of an extension of what we were just talking about with her struggles with Worf. The Klingon tradition is so kind of rigid and specific, and you're supposed to do this, and that, and that's just so not her nature to not be flexible and want to do things her own way. So this is a really good, dealing with Worf on that front is one thing because of their intimate relationship and their history and the feelings that are there. That's a whole different thing than dealing with Martok's wife, who is like the sort of ceremonial head of the family who has no emotional connection to Jadzia at all. Like that's a whole different thing. So how do you feel about maybe that step in that episode to marry those two characters and everything that kind of brings about?
Cool to see we still have marriage in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's cool that I think it shows how strong she can be. Even she wants to stay true to herself, even if it means not dealing with the Klingon side of things, because that's such a she knows how important the tradition is, obviously, but she also wants to stay true to herself. And kind of at the end of the day, all the tradition and stuff kind of falls away, and it's just about them too. So yeah, I really like it. I think it takes their two types of character kind of way they would handle things and really amplifies it. I think Worf really goes into the the really traditional side of Klingon stuff, and then Dax obviously just throws a big party, which I think just fits their characters very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that she's so just willing to stand up for what she believes in. She's a very confident type of character, so I really appreciate that.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And I guess we should just kind of evolve into what we talked about a little bit last week and touch on it again here with the end of the character before maybe we get into some more specific, moments, scenes, episodes, other things that might pop out to us. Now that you've had some time to sit on it and you're even a couple more weeks away from it, how do you feel about the end of Jadzia Dax, the way that they sort of resolve the character in Tears of the Prophets and,
feels cheap to me. I've said this before on the show. I do not have a problem with death in Trek. I think if anything, it should be more common. I mean, these folks are pushing the envelope on space travel and on the edge of exploration, things like that. It's bound to happen. But man, that's anytime something doesn't feel true to the character, that's why I have a problem with Endgame. Anytime something doesn't feel true to the character, and that's why I have a problem with the end of Enterprise as well. It doesn't feel true to the character. There's some aspects of that latter half that feel shoehorned in to try to make us feel something, and it's not because we're not feeling that because of what they shoehorned at the end. We're feeling that because she was such interwoven into all these characters. That's the problem with an ensemble type of show when you've structured it that way. There's such a pivotal pillar in all these characters' lives. I mean, we could run the bases around all the characters and how the Dax character has impacted that particular character. But when you take that away so quickly and so not true to the character, that's when I have an issue. And it does leave a bad taste in my mouth. I think up to season 5, I'm just in a fantasy land where I don't remember anything, and then once we get to season 6, know it's coming, and then it just it changes my outlook on that character.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a very few negative things I feel about Deep Space Nine, and that is one of them. And can't change it. I think they could have done a better job of writing her out of the show. I don't. It's not my thing. Terry Farrell can do whatever she wants to do. I don't have a problem with going to a different show or anything like that. I think it could have been a very more dramatic, true to character type of death.
So you're not necessarily opposed to killing her off on the merits. It's the way the episode builds up to and puts her in a position to be killed.
If I'm being honest, all the deaths in Trek, like the type of main characters, besides maybe one, that's the problem that I have, is the way that they do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean that's certainly fair. I have a hard time. I can't disagree with you. I mean, I do. There's something that just doesn't feel dramatically satisfying about Dax being in the Bajoran Shrine and Dukat happening to pop in at that moment and sort of accidentally offing her. Like, to me, that's just kind of it's just a little forced. And like you said, I think there are ways, especially given they're in. I get maybe they were trying to find a way that would be unexpected and not the thing that people would imagine, weeks out. Because in many cases, in this situation included, back in the day, unless you were living under a rock and just didn't look at. And back then there was an early version of the internet where you could go out and find news and hear things and know things were coming. So, if you were dialed in at all and watching Deep Space Nine in 1998, you knew Terry Farrell was leaving the show. So, like, there were fans who had an idea that this was coming, or knew that this was coming in some way, and there were ways to make it happen, but I think they were trying to find a way to make it happen in a way that wasn't what fans were imagining. She wasn't going to die at the helm of the Defiant in a battle, but maybe
place of glory.
Yeah, exactly. I think they made a conscious effort to not play into those expectations. But given the situation that Deep Space Nine's in at that point, and that they're in the middle of a really heated conflict, it's wartime. That opens up so many avenues to create a situation where she, ends up having to go. And I think the list of options that might have been more dramatically compelling would have been long. And I think
very long.
Yeah, I mean, and I totally get, on the merit, if it wasn't introduced in the episode that she's killed in, I wouldn't have an issue at all with the idea of exploring, do Dax and Worf want to have kids, mixed species marriage, having to deal with these things, and that they're not easy, and that there's challenges. Yeah, that's a dramatically fertile area to play around in. It was something that Star Trek hadn't dealt with in that kind of detail. Interspecies relationships were well established, going back to the very foundation of Star Trek with Spock. But dealing with the challenges, the medical barriers that have to be broken to be able to do those things, was something that would be fresh and exciting and different to play around with. But to do it in a way to sort of twist the knife and make it that much more painful also kind of feels like, I think you used the word cheap at the beginning of that conversation. I would agree with that. And the shame of it is, I think, like I said, that's a storyline that would have been really exciting and interesting to explore without having it be a knife twist to go along with the death. So, and you maybe kind of move off. Anything else on the death and the end of the character? Or you think we've kind of said our piece?
Yeah, I think I've said a piece. This doesn't this doesn't change the way I look at the character. It's just, again, another frustration that I have. Not another, just one of the few frustrations that I have with Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. Jimmy77 makes a good point. Having main characters get killed off is never going to satisfy every fan. That's true. You know,
I
when
know.
you make
Very
a
true.
decision like that,
Can make everyone happy.
you're never going to make everybody happy. You're never going to make anybody happy
Yeah.
in any aspect. But you do something as dramatically impactful and permanent as killing a character off. That ratio gets even tighter, I think. But you kind of alluded to, you know, you made a really good point, I think, with you don't need to do the knife twist with the pregnancy issue and everything because the character has already made such a big impact, and just losing the character alone and knowing how much she looms large for so many of these characters is enough, and I agree with that. So maybe that's an opening to talk about. You kind of mentioned Cisco right at the beginning. I think that's an obvious one. When you think of Dax, and aside from Worf and Cisco, who are the big obvious ones, are there other characters that you kind of envision Dax with as a good, like who else comes to mind as a good sort
Uh,
of partner with Dax as a character?
the Kira.
Kira.
That's kind of a more of like a, I don't know, kind of a girlfriend type of
Sometimes
friendship.
Yeah.
They go to the holodeck. They
Yeah.
dress up. They have fun.
Yep.
I think Quark is another great one that I think that she has fun with just toying with Quark and maybe even Julian at times. I think there's some fun stuff there as well. But yeah, I think those two for me are really yeah. I think Kira has the more friendship aspect of where they kind of care about each other and they ask just very simple questions like how's their life going, how's everything going, how's their dating life going. There's just some fun stuff with once Kira and Odo start dating. That's fun too. So yeah, I think those two for me. Yeah, but I don't know. Again, it being an ensemble. I think that there's a lot interwoven, even with the O'Briens. I mean, she babysits Yoshi and things like that. So yeah, it's not just one or two characters. It's just the nature of the show. They're really just all interlocked. So yeah, I think those two are my big ones that I think when I think about it. But it's hard because again, they're all just so interlocked. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think Kira's a big one. You know, one of my favorite Dax scenes, and I've talked about it before, is in Blood Oath, and it's the sort of bookending. The first one's not really at the beginning, but their quiet conversation in Ops about killing, and Kira talking about what killing during the occupation did to her, and as Dax is making this decision about going off on this on this mission with the three Klingons, and then at the end, they're silent, unspoken moment where they kind of acknowledge is really great stuff for those two characters. So there are moments like that I think are sprinkled throughout the 6 seasons that Jadzia Dax is in the show with those two. Quark for sure. I think Dax Loki has as much appreciation and understanding of the Ferengi culture as she does the Klingon culture. Like I think she just gets the Ferengi in a way that the other characters just don't. She's willing to kind of go along for the ride and accept some things that other characters just can't get there with. And I think that unlocks a lot of cool, fun stuff. The late nights after close and Quark's playing Tango with. Frank's staff is really good. And
Tango games are probably epic nights, I would say.
Yep. Yeah, that's really good stuff. I love her connection with Quark and her respect for Quark. I think that's the most important one. I think sometimes Quark can be kind of... There's a great scene in one of the episodes, I guess it's going back a little bit in Homefront, and Quark is talking to O'Brien and Bashir about Earth being hit, and Quark is talking about understanding it through the lens of like remembering a financial crisis on Ferenginar and being worried about what was going on at home. And O'Brien and Bashir are like, "What the hell are you talking about? Like, you don't get it at all." And Quark, when they walk away, Quark's like, "You know, unaccepting humans." I mean, he was actually trying to be genuine. Like he's thinking back to a crisis at home and talking about the way that it impacted him far away, just like these guys are impacted far away. He can't go help.
Yeah.
And I feel like Dax is the one character who would hear that and get it and know that he's being real and is actually trying to connect. So
she's very understanding.
Yeah.
Of not just your person or your personality, but just of other cultures as well.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. I think that's a really strong hallmark of that character. And I think the Bashir one as well. I think, the sort of unrequited or unculminated crush that gets played there is fun at times. I think it
cringy at times,
cringy at other times, especially early on. But that feels like something that would happen. That's obviously something that happens in real life, and to Dax's credit, I think the way that she plays it on her end, with not just being like, nope, done, and putting the wall up. Like she's able to connect with him and be his friend even through that. Like she knows how to navigate those situations in ways beyond slam the door to make it stop. And that I think that's a credit to her, and another example of having lived all these lives and having all this experience and all that wisdom, gives her that key.
Real quick, Jeff, if a genetically engineered human can't figure out how to win, then I don't know. The rules, I bet, are tough to learn. So if you want to try to track that down and try to learn it, we can definitely work that into maybe track after dark sometime. But I always some of the Klingon stuff is, or not Klingon, Ferengi stuff. It's just can be tough. To learn, so
I would be down to try to learn to play Tango for sure. Yeah. Jeff mentions that she's a counselor in many ways, which is funny. That's what Ezri becomes. An actual counselor, listens and doesn't outwardly judge. One thing I would say, if I'm thinking moments, just kind of smaller scenes, smaller little things that kind of feel like big deals for the Dax character, things that stick out in my mind. It's in A Pale Moonlight, her scene with Sisko in his office, kind of working through the Romulan plan before the Romulan plan gets unhatched. Like before there is a plan. So just she kind of role plays as like a Romulan diplomat, and Sisko's it's so good, and that to me is like so on point for those two characters, that's who that conversation would happen between, and that's how it would go.
But that's more of a counselor. Like they do that in TNG with Picard, and then him having to learn different languages and things like that. Yeah.
But this is like Dax is going to be the one character who I think can really sort of
be able to push the buttons,
push it back, and give him a fully fleshed out, like, this isn't going to be easy. Like, they're not just going to take this and take it on face value. This is going to be a tough sell, and pushes back against him in a way that kind of, I think, only she can. So that's a moment I think that always comes to mind for me. What about you? Is there anything else that we kind of haven't talked about yet, maybe in an episode, that might not feel like a big Dax story? And if you don't have anything, because we don't talk about these things in advance, I didn't give you homework or anything like that. But anything popped in mind as like and anybody in the chat as well, if you have a favorite little scene with Dax. Love to hear it.
I feel like we hit all the ones that I definitely wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. We touched on a lot. I mean,
we have. But also, I want to stay positive. I don't know. There's some stuff that I could take or leave with the Dax character, but no, I think we hit pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about.
Cyber Honey mentioned mentioned Shadow Play.
Shadow Play.
Season 2. That's kind of her being paired with Odo on an away mission. Meeting that village of holographic characters. That's a cool pairing. You don't see a ton. I'm trying to think back when we were talking about those character pairings. I think Odo and
Yeah.
Dax. There's a few here and there, and Shadowplay I think definitely is the showcase for
Yeah.
those two characters together. Good little episode too. Uh, Jeff says she has a general positive regard for others' cultures, and it shows in many scenes. Yep, opening scene with Odo in that episode. I'm thinking, yep. Um, yeah, I think through all our kind of various conversational openings with Worf and different character pairings and some of the other episodes that are big Dax showcases, I think we've touched on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Real quick, there's a positive that comes from the death. I think I like
Sure.
the end scene when Worf does the howl and,
Oh, yeah.
and Cisco's there, just really quiet. I think that's kind of true. I think that's how they would react for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
I do like that. So yeah, that's a positive that I like about the death, I guess.
Cisco's scene with the coffin is good too. I think
Oh
at
yeah,
the very end.
that's true.
That's a good moment for Avery Brooks and the Cisco character. I think that really drives home the gaping hole that's going to leave in him and
Mhm.
sets up the he's leaving for a while and takes the baseball with him. Like I think you need that scene and to have it played the way it's played to sell that he's going to leave in the middle of this.
Yeah.
They're in wartime and it's not going all that great and the tides are maybe starting to shift a little bit after that battle and the Tears of the Prophets, but I think that there's a lot of dramatic work that needs to be done to get the audience to a point where they'll buy he's gone and might not come back. Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to hear your thoughts and to experience it myself yet again going into season 7. I'm a little further off than you, but you're there. I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks to explore the Ezri character and how some of these storylines that we talked about here today get continued in sort of unconventional fashion with another new host with Ezri. So that's kind of the bizarre nature of this character is that we have this, all the building blocks of the 6 seasons, and then we kill her, and that's not really the end. I mean, a lot of these storylines that have been built are not final at the end of Tears of the Prophets. It's kind of just the beginning for some of them. There's a lot left to do with the next host. So really eager to hear what you think about season 7 and Ezri's involvement with it, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that, and maybe we'll do kind of a part 2 on Ezri after season 7, and we've kind of tied up Deep Space Nine to do that. I think that might be our next character spotlight, or another character spotlight in the future. All right, I think maybe that'll do it for us today. We're coming up on an hour, and that's our comfort zone. It's where we like to be. Last week was a little long, right? When we do the recaps or the drafts, they tend to be well over the hour. So when we're not doing those things, I think sticking to it, maybe going a little less is the way to go. So we appreciate everybody in the chat. We had a busier than usual chat today, which we love to see. We had a variety of folks: Cyber Honey, Jimmy77, Jeff, and Dr. BNNC. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I think that's it. But I appreciate all the feedback and all the contributions to the conversation. Love that you guys were interacting with each other and gave us some things to talk about. And hope to see you again next week.
Yeah, real quick. Thanks for everybody hanging in. I know there's been a lot of Deep Space Nine coverage, but I'm just looking at the docket here in the next couple weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. There's going to be some good variety of not just Deep Space Nine. I know we've been pretty Deep Space Nine heavy.
We have.
But in the next coming weeks, there's going to be a lot of different topics that should make for fun conversations.
And I think we have to say that, by the time we're here again doing another episode of Trek Live, I think what's going to wind up being 53 or 54 straight weeks, maybe, of new episodes of Star Trek will have begun. Thursday night, Season 2, Episode 1 of Star Trek Lower Decks premieres. So stay tuned. We may have something to share on that in the future as well. Some content to kind of digest the new stuff. Stay tuned. Watch us on social media. Join the Discord server to get tuned into all that as well.
Place is popping.
Place is popping in there. If you're a Discord user and you haven't joined yet, you can shoot me a DM on Twitter. I'll be happy to get you on board and give you a tutorial if you need one. If you haven't used Discord, I can get you on board that way too. But keep your eyes peeled for more coming from us in the coming days and weeks. All right. Thanks, Dan. Thanks everybody in the chat. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks.